Good morning. This is Brian. While the coffee's brewing, I'm out here on the deck. Talk a little bit about risk and reward as it relates to sourcing. I do a lot of my sourcing with online auctions these days. It wasn't always so, but it's the way the business seems to have been moving, especially for local auctions in our area. And it has some pluses and some minuses. You can't smell the cigarette smoke or cat urine on something on an online auction, but you can do it from the comfort of your home. And if you don't end up with anything, or you will only end up with a couple of items, they can often be shipped. All depends on the terms that the auction company has set up on their online website. Sometimes the auction companies, the people who hold the product, are using host companies, just like eBay. eBay's auction services, and they're not the actual company that runs the auction, but they're the customer for that company, and they put what they have for sale up in a group or a batch or a lot or a series of individual lots, and they set the terms. So I probably spend 2, 3, 4 evenings a week watching auctions close. Sometimes I bid, sometimes I don't. Often I bid and I get outbid, because there's a certain level at which I'm willing to go to where I see a profit margin in whatever item interests me. Because these days I tend to bid on items that interest me for one reason or another. Either I have a personal connection with them, like, Navy surplus or Navy plaques, or I just know from past experience that they're good items to flip. They don't require a lot of work. You get them either in person or through the mail. You look them over, inspect them, photograph them, list them. And for that, the category doesn't matter. You can do that with jewelry, you can do it with books. You can do that in many categories. If it can be mailed, or if it's close enough, the facility's close enough to go pick it up, you can do larger items. Pretty much you'll find that just about anything can be auctioned. Just changed chairs. The sun was beginning to reflect a halo around my head, and we certainly don't want to give that impression. But yeah, online auctions are a regular part of my business process, my model. So you'll get a chance to see those in coming videos. I'll probably even attach a small one onto this where we can review some items, the process, that type of thing. But risk reward. On the one hand, if you're a parent, you've probably helped your kid either set up and run a lemonade stand or a school bake sale or something. And for the kids, that's a fantastic opportunity to learn. They have very little risk. They may have some reward if their sales go well and they're not running it to turn the cash over to charity. They get something out of it at the end. The risk is low because you provided the inventory or the material to make the inventory. And hopefully you got something out of that as well. You were able to help your child, educate them, teach them a skill, because reselling is a skill. It's actually a whole series of skills. And my own granddaughters learned that at an early age. And still to this day, the older one, Izzy, when she's home from college, she goes over with one of her parents and they set up a farm stand, an organic farm stand, and Izzy gets to interact with people and sell them fresh produce. I'm sure for Izzy, it's the satisfaction of the interaction. She gets paid, but I mean for her, she's a people person. For her parents, though, it's of course recouping an investment on and the time, because investment isn't always money. Farming is a great example of that, because you send off for small seedlings or you send off for seeds, and you nurture them, you spend your time. You use some other resources like water, perhaps fertilizer. You procure small tools to assist in the work to grow those plants, and then you use your vehicle to transport them to the farm sale. And in the end, you hope for profit, because that's one of the things about reselling. You have to kind of niche or you have to source general items that have the potential for profit, if profit is the reason you're selling. Profit is not always the reason. For many, many charities that run events, we have a big school out on an island near us called Bainbridge Island, and it's run by the Rotary Club. The Rotary people fill up a school, a parking lot, and they do a big summer sale, and the proceeds go to the Rotary charities. So all those volunteers doing that work, they're not doing it for profit. In fact, they themselves are taking a monetary loss, traveling to and from, and maybe skipping a shift at work in order to do that work, but they see the profit as benefiting their community. So let's talk about that for a minute. You can have an item that has potential profit, but you don't realize any profit at the end. I've got one here sitting as an example. In a minute I'll pull it up. This is what they call a molly pouch. You open this Velcro flap and it holds 6 double wide magazines or 12 singles, and it's got some patches to make it colorful. This one happens to be new with tags, and the brand is Orca. But as we take a look at that item, it came in the mail yesterday, and it had the potential to be a winner for me. But the process in this instance was a loser. And it has to do with some factors when using online auctions to source. Well, using any auction to source for that matter. If you're the type of buyer or potential buyer who wants to go out and hit thrift stores or yard sales, you've got the same situation. You can spend the day, time, and you can travel around the area burning up your fuel, and we're paying about $4.70 a gallon unless we use our coupon, but you can travel around the area burning up fuel, and in the end you can come up with a big goose egg, zeros, or very little to resell. So you've spent your resources. In the end, you don't have an item or don't have enough items to potentially cover your expense and make a profit, because reselling for individuals as a business model is a profit maker, supposedly. So in the case of this bag, I paid, I think it was about $7 for it. It's new with tags. Basically it's an ammo pouch that goes across your chest, or you carry it over your shoulder on a strap. But because I wasn't there to watch the whole auction, I had put in a couple of early bids, expecting to then sit down and buy 10 items, 15 items, 20 items. I think I had about 40 tagged. Because I wasn't there when the auction closed and I hadn't had a chance to up my bids on the other items in the auction, that ended up as the sole item I won from that particular company. So my shipping on top of my hammer price was about $10. Plus I had to pay the auction's commission, because some auctions put up what they call a buyer's premium, which is just another fee. They started charging that about 15, 20 years ago, many of them in-person auctions and online auctions. And once it became the norm in the industry, people often forget that it's there. But it might be 8%, 12%, might be 18% for an online auction. And supposedly that fee is to cover the overhead admin charges, because those auction companies end up paying a hosting service, and they end up paying a credit card processing service in many cases. So they're charging you that extra fee. So you got to read the terms. They're charging you that extra fee just like a credit card company does. So you add in, I think in this case it was 18%. So now I'm up to about $9 for the item plus $10 to ship it. Well, the Chinese competition for these items without the fancy patches is about $10. So obviously this item is a loss for me, especially if I were to put it up on an eBay platform, have to pay eBay's fees, and then ship it out. And if I wasn't careful with the shipping, I could end up owing the post office. So all the effort on this particular item could be lost in the process. So this one would be a thumbs down in the Coliseum. But it wasn't the intent when you bid. And that's one of the things about online auctions. You have to do your research, preferably before the auction starts, to know where to cap each of the lots. And you have to have a plan for how many lots you intend to either buy, bid on, have shipped, or go to pick up. One of the things I've been noticing lately with some of these online platforms is that their software, it used to let you look during the auction to see how many items you'd already won. Now that may not seem important on the surface, but the reality is if you're traveling with a car and you're going 3-4 hours to pick up the items you won, what happens if the accumulated volume exceeds that of your car? Well, they're not usually open long enough for 2 trips, and to make 2 trips, you just lost a big hunk of your profit in fuel costs, not to mention time. So they've kind of removed your ability to keep track of it. So as the auction items, work their way up the screen and the clock counts down, and you believe you've got it if you're bidding on 20, 30, 40 items, because it could be small items, could be large, medium size. You can't go back and say, well, let's see, how many total did I win? Used to be right there. You just went to a different section, or they stayed on the screen and you scrolled up, and you could go, okay, that's going to fill a tote. Those 3 together are going to fill a tote. That's an IKEA bag full. And you could, in your mind, you could play Tetris with the items you just purchased and say, okay, yeah, those will fit in my car with room to spare. I think we've already showed you one trip up to Renton to pick up items from about 6 auctions, and they fit in the car no problem. But if I had bought twice as much or 3 times as much, then I'd be having to say, well, let's see. All right, all those together, they're not going to fit in the little Kia. I'm going to have to take a truck. Well, the Kia's mileage is much, much better than the truck's. So all of a sudden, the truck is the player in the game, and I just lost twice as much in fuel costs. And you've got to factor that into your bidding. Some auctions will ship. So if you're playing in the arena of, say, small jewelry, costume jewelry, small figurines, Pokemon cards, if you're buying military surplus medals, patches, then an awful lot of them can be put in a shoebox and mailed to you at a fairly reasonable rate. If the same $10 box, because this item came in a box that was probably 6 by 8 by 12. Well, that's most of a cubic foot, but it was only coming a few hundred miles away, so she charged me $10. Used a recycled box, which I'm fine with as long as it's clean and in good condition. But I could have bought 20 lots of 6 military patches for ships or for aircraft squadrons, and it would have fit the same box. Shipping has to be factored in, is where I'm going with this. So some items have a better potential profit than others. You know this if you bought and sold anything. But it takes just about as long to list say you've got a 10-carat gold ring, good to look at, gold is up, should be a good item, you got a chance to buy it in an online auction. They're also selling costume jewelry in groups. So you decide to buy a bag of costume jewelry that includes some gold tone rings. And if you're not familiar with that, often the word tone is put into a listing title or a description to say that it is gold colored, but it is not gold. Yeah, some people will say gold in their title, and they're simply referring to the color of the product. And then they end up with a buyer who's unhappy because they thought they were buying something that was real gold. Of course, some of that's on the buyer for not asking the question, should they really be able to buy a real gold ring for $9.99 plus shipping? But the point is that it takes about the same amount of time to process and list the real gold ring as it does the gold tone ring, and your profit potential can be very different. I say can be because if you had to pay $90 to acquire the hammer price, the fees, the shipping, the real gold ring, and you only sell it for $120, and you're paying eBay their fees, and you're paying perhaps some of the shipping cost or packing material cost. Have you made the profit? Has your ROI actually reached or exceeded your goal? Where the costume jewelry takes the same amount of time to do the listing, but your risk is very different. If it goes missing in the mail, you're only out the cost of the ring and your time and materials for packing. If you list the gold ring, well then, your starting point for your loss or your risk is much, much higher to begin with. Okay, so another thing about risk reward is that if you tie up your cash, you've got a limited amount. Most people have a limited amount of money to invest in stock. If you tie it up on Monday and a great deal becomes available to you on Tuesday, better than what you bought on Monday, then you're faced with the idea of being short of funds. You can't realize the potential on that Tuesday deal because you went for the Monday deal, which may have had a more marginal set of parameters. Space. Again, just like money, most of us have a limited amount of storage space. Our shelving, our bins, our storage, before we have to turn to off-site or rented storage, or infringing on the space inside your home, your personal space. One of the things that has always unnerved Rose a bit is when she begins to feel that the latest carload coming in is making her feel a little claustrophobic or cramped. If I have it spread out, like I've got a group spread out on the dining room table today, I'm going to be photographing them. And with as bright as the sun is today, I'm thinking the dining room was a good place to do it. So while it sits on the table, though, Rose feels like it's infringing on her space, and it is. That's my point. Once you've allocated the amount of space for your day-to-day operations, your photo booth, your storage, your packing, and your shipping, when you exceed that, you begin to notice, and your attention turns to, well, maybe I should get some off-site storage. Maybe I should rent storage. Well, all those numbers, you have to run them because you have to decide whether the monthly rental or the personal favor you've just called in to store them at your parents or your kids or your neighbors, that all has some value, So how many of those chits can you cash in to get your neighbor to put your stuff in his garage for a week, 2 weeks? Maybe it stretches to 3 weeks. And pretty soon, his wife is wanting to know when you're going to get your stuff out of his garage. So buying and sourcing consume resources. Time is one of them. If I buy a group of items that includes 100 books, I'm buying the contents of a bookshelf. Well, those 100 books are going to take a certain amount of volume in the car. They're going to take a certain amount of volume in storage until they're listed. They're going to take a certain amount of volume in storage while they're pending sale. And that's space that I don't have for that next thing that might be better than books. But that's what you sell is all a personal choice. And sometimes you sell to fund your hobby. Say you're a record collector and you like LPs. And one of the ways you like to source is to buying groups of LPs being sold at auction. It's one of the common items you find on older estate sales. And depending on the auction company, they may do a very nice job of showing what the albums are. They may not do such a good job on showing you the condition of the album covers. And they may just show you a top-down shot of a bin or a milk crate or something full of albums. And the description will be assorted classical albums. Well, is that your niche? Are classical albums your niche? I think most people of my age like to or understand the concept that old rock albums or the ones that came after, the punk rock and the grunge, and have some value if they're in good shape. But it's often hard on an online auction to tell whether they're in good shape, which is why some buyers restrict themselves to those sales where they can show up, flip through them, pull the album out of the sleeve, take a look at them, check for scratches, look at the condition of the sleeves themselves, or they won't buy it. Or they won't just buy lots. But if you do, you definitely don't want to have those shipped to you, because a lot of 30, 40, 50 albums, now you're beginning to talk some serious weight. So if you don't trust the source, I wouldn't advise doing those kinds of buys. But if you can go over in person and there's a big collection to pick from, and they're broken down into genres, then perhaps it is a good deal if you're not driving too far. But what do you do with the extras? What do you do with those you're not interested in either adding to your collection, and you don't think there's a market to sell them individually? Well, some people who play in that game buy in volume and then turn around and send what they don't want, the fluff, the bundle fodder, they send it back to a different auction, one that deals in low-end items, or they donate it, or they use them for skeet practice. but they have to find a way to continually move that product out so that they're getting what they want, but not having to deal with all that surplus that's taking up space. Okay, so then when you're dealing with online auction, you've got the FOMO. It's the same feeling you have when you're dealing with auctions in person, or someone else is telling you about an opportunity they got and you weren't there. But FOMO is the fear of missing out. And auction companies, auctioneers, and other people who sell tend to use that as a psychological technique. Oh, this is the last one. We're not going to be getting any more of these. You better snap this up right now. Well, that clicking clock at the auction, that countdown timer, is what's driving that FOMO. Should I bid? Should I bid again? Oh, somebody just outbid me. I better think about this. I better bid. And you have to be careful of that when you're playing in the online auction game, because that's one of the ways you can end up killing your profit. If you just did an extra bid and the bid increments at this point in the auction are larger, it doesn't matter so much if the bids are $1 a bid. But if the bids are $25, $50 a bid, those numbers can start to jump up pretty quickly. And with most auctions in person or online, the higher the price range is, the bigger the bid increment jumps. So yeah, you've really got to watch that whole FOMO, or you can end up investing in items that you paid so much for that you're basically going to be recouping your capital, but you're going to be expending your time and your storage space. Okay, one way that people sometimes start out with reselling is they look around their home or their office, their workshop, and they say, I need to learn a process. It's similar to the way I've been learning this YouTube process the last few weeks. And I'm still going through. I've got new footage that I'm shooting today, and I've still got footage that I shot a couple weeks ago when I was first starting, because I carried the camera around with me for about a week. And if it was interesting, or the life of a reseller thing, if I was packing, if I was shipping, if I was going to do a pickup, I was filming snippets. It's basically ended up with a lot more film. Oh, there's Rosie with coffee. So I ended up with a lot more film footage than I've been able to edit. Well, it's the same way with learning the process of reselling. You've got to learn how to buy, how to list, how to ship, and all of those take time. And you don't want to have a lot of risk involved in that time. So what some people do is they start out with the things that are around the house. Maybe an old hobby you don't do anymore, a surplus you've got, those gifts that you would normally re-gift next Christmas. Well, those are all potential items to start with for your listings. And you don't want to use the most expensive items in your inventory to learn to list. And you can also list with a smaller margin when you're starting out. Like the kids running the lemonade stand, if you don't have any fresh capital invested in the item, your risk is a lot lower. Yeah. Now, I'm not suggesting you sell your neighbor's items or your parents' items, but the point is if you've got items already and you're no longer using them, they're not benefiting you, those are good items to consider starting out the process with. All right, one of the last topics before I turn to fresh coffee. This one Rosie's going to like. She's just sat down here. Don't become a hoarder. Yeah, that got me a look. Initially, anyway, don't buy more than you can process. It's probably some of the best advice you can be given by somebody who's been doing this 27 years. If you buy everything you see that you want to try or you think will resell, and you buy it in a volume faster than you can process, you're going to be walking that tightrope between hoarder and reseller. There are weeks or days where I felt more like a hoarder. Life's events catch up with you. For instance, this afternoon, Rose and I are going to go to an outdoor concert. Well, that'll shorten my potential for listing today. So if you expected to list 15 items today, or 25 items, or 5 items, and you don't get to those, that's backing up. So initially anyway, until you understand this process and the ebbs and flows of seasonal selling, try to avoid it. Because if you're stumbling across the bins in the aisles, you've got the table covered inside waiting to process, Your laundry room is stacked with clothing that you just couldn't pass up and you know will resell. Yeah, you're walking that fine line. And that's one of the bigger lessons you'll learn as you go through this, is how much is too much. You know, I've got to turn off the spigot eventually if the outflow doesn't keep up, because otherwise the bucket will overflow. You know, the pool will flood. The dam will break. You can pick any metaphor you want to, but the point's the same. Watch your volume. You know, get your process down. And the next thing we'll do is take a look at some auctions that where we can consider whether the items were good or not. And in the end, perhaps I'll tell you which ones I did buy. Show them to you. We'll look at them even closer.